here. Now, we're going to talk today of topics of interest to people who might think they might be transsexual if you're young, transgender maybe, and for the parents and carers of people like that. I want to explain some of the terms that you'll commonly hear being used, which you may not understand. So the first one is a thing called gender non-conforming behaviour, and it's normally shortened to GNC. Now, gender non-conforming behaviour essentially means that a child is tending to behave in ways that are more normally associated with the opposite sex. Now, to get underneath this a little bit quite quickly here, it's an axiom of modern feminism that there's no such thing as innate genders and things like that. Well, it's just not true. There are specific behaviours that we know are associated with each sex. So gender nonconformity is when your child is displaying the behaviours typical of the other sex. Now, the thing to understand here is GNC is a part of normal childhood, because children will explore character roles. So they might well decide, well, I'm going to be a girl for a while to see what it's like. There's a boy who really likes the Peter Pan stories and loves Peter Pan, you know, 2 years old, he's running about with a green suit on and a sword in his hand, might suddenly say, well, what's this Wendy thing? What's it like to be Wendy? And that's just developmental role play. You don't need to worry about that. That's fine, it's normal. Let it pass. Don't make a fuss, let it go. If he wants to wear a pink dress for 2 weeks, let him do it. You know, you're talking about a very young child. The next, so that's GNC, gender non-conforming. Remember that. In most cases, it really isn't anything at all to worry about. And don't be misled. However, there is a concept called persistent, insistent, and consistent. Now, if GNC behaviour, that is, remember, behaviour normally associated with the opposite sex, becomes persistent, that is, it continues for a long time, it's consistent, it's always the same. It's always, Mama, I don't want to wear those clothes, they're boy clothes. Wearing very typical for boy children is to wear a t-shirt or a towel on their head to simulate hair. And this happens all over the world, I find this everywhere. If they're doing that persistently, they're doing it a lot, you have to pay attention. And I think any such expression that lasts for 6 months to a year, certainly more, you know, you really have to be paying attention here. Something might be happening. If this behaviour is insistent, that is, don't call me John, my name is Sally, right? Don't call me your son, I'm your daughter. I'm a girl, don't call me a boy, I'm a girl. That sort of thing. That's insistent. She's actually, the person, whether it's male or female, it can happen both ways, is trying to get the people around her to accommodate the sense that she has of herself as not being of the sex that, you know, she was born to be, or he or she was born to be. And then there's consistency. If this just keeps, it's persistent, it's become insistent, and it's consistent, it's always the same. You know, it's always the same things that we're doing. We're not changing roles. We're not swapping into different characters. We're always the same person, but this person is not the gender that you might expect. Now, there's a lot of fuss about this going on just now. Some of it's coming from some deeply unpleasant people. There is an alliance of people called the Gender Crit Movement, who are basically scaremongering parents. We're going to deal with this with them bit by bit, but if you're a parent, you need to listen to what I'm saying before you listen to anybody else. So certainly, I advise you to read the science, and the science is all linked to from my site. I'll give you the link at the end of the program. I'll strip it underneath. Now, if your child is persistently, consistently, and insistently GNC, and this passes through puberty, that is, they're still doing it when they're 12. Typically, by the way, the cases that we're most interested in here, the cases that are most likely to produce a result in adulthood, can actually begin at the age of 2. So by the time you've got a 12-year-old child who's demonstrating consistent, persistent, and insistent GNC, you've been looking at it for 10 years. The parents of children in this situation are not going to be surprised. This is not something new. This is something they've become well used to. their child is, for 10 years, has been wearing a towel on his head as a girl, you know? Nearly all such children will be a thing that I call transgender homosexual. And I use that term because I don't like the word transgender, but it is actually a real term, and it means, for example, a feminine male homosexual. It's a person who's attracted to men, a male person who's attracted to men, but who wants to play the feminine role. In brief, that person would like to be penetrated. Usually likes very masculine males, not gay males. Wants a real masculine guy. And the inverse, of course, in women, but isn't herself female. Now, all of these people have the propensity to transition, right? To be and live as the sexual, the gender opposite to the one that they were born in, if you like. All of them. A significant number don't transition. They stay as they are. They become what we call gender conforming homosexuals. So that means that they are still transgender homosexuals, but for males they will affect masculinity, and for females they'll affect some degree of femininity. And this gives you the classic Western gay, you know, this person who's highly effeminate, but who dresses like a man, and who appears to be a man, but is actually, in sexual terms, a woman. Now, the next thing to understand is a thing called gender dysphoria. And gender dysphoria is simply the mismatch between your sexuality, that's who you would like to have sex with and how you want to have sex, and your gender. Because gender is the outward expression of our sexuality. It's how we tell other people what kind of sexual partners we're interested in. It serves other functions, but this is the main one. It's the primary interface through which we connect to the rest of the people on the planet, to the rest of the world, is from what we are, our gender. And if you are male but have female sexuality, that is, you're transgender homosexual, you want to have big, hairy, masculine partners, but you're presenting as a male, then the chances are that you will experience some kind of gender dysphoria. Nearly all such homosexuals will, if they're being honest, admit that at some stage in the past they did wonder if they were transsexual, right? And practically all of the kind of transsexuals we're talking about here, I'll come on to that in a minute, if you investigate the past, they'll say, well, you know, I didn't know when I was younger, was I a gay guy? And then I suddenly realised, no, I'm not a gay guy. For me, it's more. I had to move forward and become a girl, and now I'm really happy. And that's what they'll say. So there is this kind of fluid point, you know, that moves on a scale. This scale is called an etiology, and transgender homosexuality for both males and females is actually an etiology. It's a scale. And at one end you get people who are gender conforming more or less, but who will have decidedly opposite sex characteristics, if you like. And at the other end you get fully transitioned transsexuals. Why would someone, or at what point would someone transition? Well, remember that transgender homosexuality is an etiology, it's a scale of variation. So gender dysphoria is also a scale of variation. So in some people it's very strong, and in some people it's less so, right? Other characteristics are also on scales of variation. A person will transition when the gender dysphoria that they feel exceeds their fear of social rejection and intolerance for transitioning, right? So typically in the West, which is extremely homophobic and transphobic and resistant to male femininity, only the very most femininely attractive boys, and vice versa for women, for females rather, will transition. Because the first thing they're thinking is, can I actually pass in society as a woman? You know, is it going to work for me? Am I going to walk into a shop and people say, ha ha ha, tranny? Or am I going to walk in the shop and people go, hi, miss, how are you doing today? If they feel they can get away with it, if they feel that they can successfully pass in society and live as women, the chances are they will transition. Because they don't have the fear of social rejection that's acting against their gender dysphoria. So you can see that there's an enormous number of variables going on here. Social rejection also includes the attitudes of parents and professionals around them. So if somebody has been put in therapy with a professional counsellor who's saying, no, you mustn't be, if they're talking about boys here, you mustn't be a transsexual, you're not a girl, biologically you're not a girl, you must be a boy. Now, the fact is that male transgender homosexuals tend to be very high in agreeability and very self-effacing. It's absolutely typical. They're extremely sweet people until they're abused long enough. And they may well go along with this just to keep everybody happy and say, okay, fine, that's what I'll have to do. But that means that they will suffer the gender dysphoria. They will face a lifetime of gender dysphoria if they do that. And the reason for that is that after about 23, particularly for Western males, most will not transition. It's very rare to transition after 23 because the masculinization process has gone too far. There's nothing they can do to stop them. They can't actually convincingly look at the mirror and say, that's a woman anymore. They can't do it. And you'll hear some therapists saying, oh, you should keep them, don't let them transition until they're 23. That's just a covert way of attempting to stop them. What is happening here is that people are trying to stop these people, these transgender homosexuals, from transitioning until it's too late. It's extremely unpleasant technique. It's devious, nasty. We know, if you've been paying attention, you've got yourself your persistent, insistent and consistent, shall we say a boy, child who has been showing all these signs for years, a decade, more, and by the time they're 14. Well, you can be pretty sure that's HSDS. You should at least allow the possibility at this stage. And the best thing to do is to say, look, are you going to be comfy or just living as a girl? And try it out. Use maybe puberty blockers to stop the slow onset of masculinization, but say, try living as a girl. Don't go all in. Just try it. Does it fit you? Is it something that you're going to be happy doing? It's that person's life. It's not the parent's life. It's the child's life. And the child should be encouraged to try and see if it works. Okay? And if it works, you take it forward. Now, those people who transition, those transgender homosexuals who transition in this way are called homosexual transsexuals. They're sometimes called trans kids. True transsexuals, or the APA's DSM-5, for example, they call it early onset gender dysphoria. But essentially, the thing you have to remember is that they are homosexual. We found that out. They are definitely homosexual. And by dint of transitioning, they're transsexual. They've transcended their sex. Now, there are a couple of other terms, and we'll come back to what you should do if you find that this is the case that applies to you or your child in more videos. The first thing to do, by the way, before we go on further, however, is do not allow yourself to be scaremongered by the gender crit movement. They really just don't want to see anyone transition ever. It's a political ideology. On the other hand, don't be bounced into it by over-enthusiastic trans activists. Because actually, they are ideologues too. Everybody is different. Every single individual has his own or his or her own most appropriate path in life, and it's up to the parents and those around them to find out what that is and to assist them. Right? It's not to force anything on them or to encourage them along certain paths that might suit you. There's a terrible habit amongst Western therapists, professional therapists, or there was anyway, to assume that, and I quote, gay is always better than trans. Well, I've discussed this before, there is simply no evidence for that. None whatsoever. And if you start from that standpoint, then you're always going to be pressuring the subject, the patient, the child, call them what you like, in a particular way, which might not necessarily be the appropriate way. Now, we've discussed HSDS, homosexual transsexuals. There's another kind of male transitioner, and they are called non-homosexual. And in this context, just for those who don't know what homosexual is, homosexual means exclusively attracted to the same sex since childhood. They have never had any interest, romantically or sexually, in the opposite sex. Not ever. It's always been their interest is for boys in men and for girls in other girls. Now, the other type, the non-homosexual in males, they're not like that. They can have any orientation you like. The point is they're not actually homosexual. So for many years it was nobody knew why they were doing this, why were they coming forward to transition. And in the 1980s and 90s, Ray Blanchard, in a course of about 20 papers, which are linked to on my site, identified that they have a condition called autogynephilia. And that is a man's propensity to be aroused at the thought or image of himself as a woman. Now, we've discussed autogynephilia at length. Please go back to my other videos and look at it there. The thing to remember about autogynephilia is that it sets on later. In the APA DSM-5, they can say that it can set on as late as early as 9 or 10. I've rarely seen a case like that. Most cases set on at or after puberty. Now, there might be some indications beforehand that things are not quite, I don't like to use the word normal, but you know what I mean, that things are maybe a bit something to look at. But they're not going to be the highly, for boys, they're not going to be the highly feminine boy children, the proto-HSTSs, the transgender homosexual guys. They're just not going to be called sissy. They're not going to be, you know, attacked by other children for their feminine behaviour, things like that. They're going to be pretty normal boys. And then, after puberty, this condition sets on. It does seem to be associated with early masturbation. Whether masturbation is a trigger, or whether that's just an association, I have no idea. I've certainly spoken to plenty of AGPs who bring up this connection, who say, yeah, I remember my early masturbation sessions, and maybe there was some item of clothing, female clothing around it, it's like, that really turns me on. They then developed this image of themselves as a woman. There's a difference, by the way, between clothing fetishism and AGP, but let's just stay away from that for the time being. AGPs, if they're dysphoria, and I've discussed how that comes about, it's not the same as HSTS dysphoria. If their dysphoria gets strong enough, they're the same, they're going to feel like, I want to transition. Now, the thing to remember about this is, it sets on later, and it sets on suddenly. Right? It's bang, they wake up, and it's like, oh. And then they may well suppress it, but they themselves know that it's set on, and usually with no warning. There may be a little bit of indication, but not the way that an HSTS does. In HSTS, the whole thing is telegraphed for years. So there is a possibility of your son coming along, age 17, and saying, I'm a girl, Dad, I'm a girl. And you go, well, what? You've never shown any signs of this, son? What's this all about? And the chances are this individual is AGP. Now, opinions vary. There is the fast track to surgery view, which I disagree with completely. My own view is that AGP is best managed. It may well be that the individual would be better to just try living in the opposite gender for a period of time. You might well want to think about puberty blockers, because AGPs are not, as non-homosexual male transsexuals, are not feminine the way the HSTS. I mean, HSTS are always feminine little boys. They're so cute, it's unbelievable. You know, and actually when they get to puberty, they still look like girls. And people will think, oh, that's your daughter there, especially if they're wearing their hair a bit long. And you're going, that's my son. What are we talking about? But AGPs are not like that. They're masculine. They look masculine, and they masculinize very rapidly. The classic case to look at here would be Blair White on one hand, a YouTuber, another YouTuber called Justin Riley Dennis. Similarly aged people. Blair is HSTS, Justin is AGP. And you can see right away how masculine he is. Or she, if you wish. If you want to help a child in that position, a young person, this is not a child. I mean, we're talking about people who are 16, around about, when this starts to become a problem. Then there may be an imperative to try to arrest the masculinization process. Remember, these are non-homosexual. These people will often pursue relationships with women. And certainly, I live in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and you see plenty of AGPs here. They do tend to desist in their mid-30s. It just seems to stop. And sometimes it's to do with the work they want to do. Sometimes it's just that their looks are gone. And it's like, I can't do it anymore. I can't carry it off. And they might well revert to being a heteronormative gender role, and that some even get married. You know, they get married, have children, and just be fathers, and that's it. And they kind of like get it out of their system. I mean, this happens also in South America. You find quite a few cases of this. People who were trans, but then they reverted, they desisted, got married, have kids, are dads, and have presumably absolutely amazing stories to tell their grandkids when they grow up, you know. But in this case, please note that while feminizing hormones probably don't cause that much of damage, you know, depending on the dosage, these people definitely should not be getting GRS. Right? As long as there is a possibility that they might want at some stage later in their life to desist, get married, and they might resist that suggestion, but it still may be a possibility. If that's possible, that they could desist and then think about getting married, having kids, then they definitely do not want to be getting GRS. They don't, and people around them need to, as gently as possible, say, well, yeah, you know, let's try changing up those, let's try the hormones, maybe even some facial surgery, maybe boobs, but you know, leave the downstairs alone. You might want it someday. Okay, so that's AGP. And the other one that is really current just now, and something you need to know about, is a thing called ROGD, or rapid onset gender dysphoria. ROGD sets on almost overnight. It mainly affects girls. It's quite rare in males, and to be honest with you, I suspect that most of the ROGD that you're seeing in males, it's actually AGP. That's what it is. It's just a AGP arriving at that date and that's it. Because rapid onset, as I say, is quite classic for AGP. ROGD then we could say might well be uniquely happening in females. Now if it turns out that you're dealing with ROGD, you've got to be so cautious. You do not want to be ruining your daughter's life. ROGD is a big problem, and people should not be undergoing surgery because of a diagnosis of ROGD. It just shouldn't be happening. This is wrong. This is an awful lot of young women being permanently damaged. Just for the last couple of minutes, what's the time on this one? Yeah, I want to talk about gender trending. Gender trending it's an identity politics, identity that they want to be part of. It's no different from emo or punks or any of these ones. And the very last thing they should even be thinking about is any kind of surgery. You know, just let them do the thing. Wear the blue hair, who cares? It's not going to cause any problems. These ones actually shouldn't be taking hormones either. I can't see any clinical justification for it, and I can't see what the benefit would be. I mean, they don't really, boys who are, you know, this transgender thing, they don't want to be girls, they just want to be, I'm cool because I'm trans. You know, it's purely a fashion thing. Just let it go, don't get it go. I'm concerned here about the ones who have actually got real gender dysphoria, right, that is HSTS, and non-homosexual gender dysphoria, which in males is autogynephilia. And those young women, principally young women, who are being identified as ROG, rapid onset gender dysphoria, could disappear as quickly as it sets on. And you'll see already many cases being reported where people have actually had all their surgeries, girls, women have had all their surgeries, including, you know, the double mastectomy, the hysterectomy, the penile reconstruction, and then the whole thing just goes away and they're looking at a completely ruined body. Destroyed. Well, you don't want to be doing that. I am concerned that HSTS, who are the weakest and most vulnerable of all of these groups, and the least likely to speak up for themselves, are being erased. And the reaction, which is partly provoked by the justifiable concerns about ROGD, which the so-called gender critics are using as ammunition to try to shut down anyone who's trans. Really trans, you know, anyone with gender dysphoria. I am concerned that that is going to start impacting on genuine homosexual transsexuals. They will start putting the frighteners on parents of genuine HSTS children. They will start scaremongering. They will start scaremongering to the professionals, threatening them with potential legal action, things like that, such that people who need help, the HSTS, don't get it. And that's what they want. They want these people not to get help. They want to subject them to a lifetime of dysphoric misery because it suits their political agenda. That's all it is. These are deeply unpleasant people. I'm not talking about the concerned parents here. I'm talking about the radical feminists and the new gay man activists who are the backbone of the gender crit movement. They used to be called TERFs, but that didn't include the gays. These are nasty, nasty people, and they are in the business of frightening parents.